Yo, what's going on, YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and today we are taking a look at the latest, of course, on the saga out in Vancouver in Western Canada. As the Vancouver Canucks, we have some more updates on the latest trade scenarios, and I'm actually going to give some more mock trades on what I think could be happening in Vancouver. So we're going to start off with some of the stuff that, you guys have to watch my other Vancouver videos to kind of get the full idea of what's going on necessarily in Vancouver here over the last couple of months. You look at the Canucks playlist, it kind of breaks down kind of what's led us to this point in Vancouver. Why are they selling Bo Horvat? Why aren't they keeping their captain? Why is everybody, available and not considered untouchable, including Quinn Hughes? Elias Pettersson being the only untouchable. What has led us to this point that we are at with the Vancouver Canucks? I'm going to get to that today and expand on that, giving you guys some more new information. So the latest on Brock Boeser. We're going to start off with Boeser. The Vancouver Canucks have given Boeser permission to speak with other teams. That was back earlier this month, December 4th, there was some talk around Boeser and what was potentially on the table. Around that same time, we were also hearing rumors about Bo Horvat and potentially where he could end up. And at the time, according to a couple of sources, there was reportedly a trade connection between the Avalanche and Canucks, which we expect would have involved Bo Horvat. So then things kind of got worse. And this was the thing that, the problem is I think Bo Horvat was more frustrated with the Canucks management team for the fact that this information got out. And that information was just a couple days after that report about Colorado. And it was apparently the sense that Bo Horvat had actually rejected a contract from the Canucks, and now you're starting to get into stuff. Okay, this is stuff you really don't want getting out in the public, especially in a hockey hardcore area like Vancouver. That's not news you really want to get out there. You could get away with it a little bit in Columbus or Arizona. I'm not discrediting those franchises, but there was a clear difference in terms of the hardcore fan base between, say, Vancouver and the Arizona Coyotes, right? So that came out. Now we started to hear stuff about Oliver Ekman-Larsson. They've asked him multiple times to waive his no-trade clause, and that doesn't seem like it's on the table. And you may be wondering, well, what does that have anything to do with what you just talked about? Well, for two things. The reasons they're trying to move Brock Boeser and trying to get Oliver Ekman-Larsson to move his no-movement clause is so they could facilitate a trade to get rid of some of those contracts, whether it's a Brock Boeser or, in this case, an Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Now, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, I think, is the clear favorite to get bought out next summer by the Vancouver Canucks, and it's been one of those projects they tried and it's failed miserably, and I think they're going to have to rebuild that blue line here. That may be part of some of the trades that they make here over the next 5 to 6 months, but that is going to be a critical point here, is finding a way to get out from under that Oliver Ekman-Larsson contract, whether that's a trade or that's buying him out next summer. I'm leaning toward the second one more likely than not. Now, this was the thing December 12th. So we heard the thing about on December 8th about potentially him, Bo Horvat rejecting some contract extensions. And then they got to the point where this was the last time they were going to talk, because apparently the Canucks have gone as far as they can go in contract talks with Bo Horvat and are now prepared to take the best trade offer for him. And that was from Rick Dhaliwal. And the backlash from that, which is kind of where we're at today, Bo Horvat was not pleased that that had gotten out to the public. The fact that he had not only been rejecting a couple of extensions before that, like we heard on December 8th, just a few days before, but actually on December 12th, actually hearing that, this is as far as we can possibly go and he will not extend, which means we're going to lead into the second point, which is we're going to have to trade this guy. And I guess it's better that they figured that out December 12th than finding that out in February, right before the trade deadline. But nonetheless, it's not really a great look. And considering that's your captain, and he's having a really good season this year, again, the outlook from the public, not too good here for the Vancouver Canucks. And then the report was the club's latest offer, which is believed to be an 8-year, $64 million contract, which would be $8 million per season, was recently rejected by Bo Horvat. Bo has earned the right to hit the free agent market. The Canucks will now take the best offer for him. My feeling for a Horvat trade will be a young center, a young defender, and a draft pick. And that's going to get us to where we inevitably go, and we will get there in terms of mock trades. Then we heard on December 12th, that same day, Canucks star forward Elias Pettersson was sent home from practice. Again, could have been a coincidental medical situation. We never really got too much clarity on what happened there with Pettersson, but it's kind of fitting that the same day that the whole Horvat thing goes down, Elias Pettersson doesn't have to show up to practice that day. Kind of interesting. Maybe a little bit of frustration from Pettersson as well. Then we started to hear the quotes from Horvat, and we've already talked about those, how he's focused on playing this year, and he'll worry about his future in the offseason, and he's worried about playing on the ice right now, because at the end of the day, that is the most important thing right now. And we started to hear more rumors about, kind of at this point, trying to just remove the contract of Brock Besser, maybe even taking a second or third round pick even, just to get him out of town. And it's kind of, as kind of shallow as that sounds, that's kind of where they're at with Brock Besser at this point. And if a team's desperate enough for a top 6 scoring winger, they might even take that full contract. And I think that's really the ultimate point here for the Canucks. And then the Canucks have the plan, which is a certain return for Horvat, and we'll get to that. And again, the key thing was they wanted a good center, a good defenseman, and a good draft pick. So keep that in mind. And then we heard just a couple of days ago, the New York Islanders have inquired about the desired return for forward Bo Horvat, and that was from Stefan Rosner. So this thing blew up earlier this week. Bo Horvat to the Islanders and this and that. And there's reason to believe that something is, that is an attainable option. Now, the reason for that is Bo Horvat is, the way he's playing this year, he's got 10 plus power play goals. Something the Islanders struggle with is the power play and the ability to put the puck in the back of the net. Bo Horvat would help in that regard. The Islanders do have the cap space. If they're able to make a couple of little moves here and there, they can make that work. And not to mention, they do have some decent prospects. Now, the Islanders are not known right now for their prospect pool, but they do have some players that definitely should be enticing, at the very least, to the Vancouver Canucks. Now, the thing is, if it's going to be the price we talked about, a center, a defenseman, and a draft pick, the Islanders do have the capability to do that trade. The question is, are they going to actually do that? Now, from looking at what the Islanders have in the prospect pool right now, you look at their depth chart, okay? So right now, let's take a look. So right now, if we're taking a look at the Islanders, really the top guys that you're kind of looking at this point. So first off, looking at that center is Arttu Raty. I think that's the guy that is really going to be a big focal point for the Canucks if they do go the route of the Islanders in a trade. Arttu Raty probably has to be at the center of that conversation. That's been the big report we've been hearing. Now, the fact that a defenseman also has to be included also leaves you with the idea of a couple of different guys. And that's where things get a little interesting. So Samuel Bolduc is a really good prospect. He's a kid from the 2019 NHL draft, second round pick of the Islanders, 57th overall. And he's currently playing in the American Hockey League with the Bridgeport Sound Tigers, or the Bridgeport Islanders now. So there is reason to believe that he could come up and play in the National Hockey League. He played in the QMJHL for a couple of seasons before he was drafted by the New York Islanders. But now he's played 3 years in the pros. And is there a spot for him in the New York Islanders lineup? potentially next season. Now, I think some of that depends on what happens with some of the Islanders' other defensemen. Scott Mayfield is on the final year of his contract, so maybe there's a little bit of wiggle room for him to make the lineup next season. But you never really know with those types of players, right? He's still 22 years old. We know how Lou is with players and their development. He's definitely very, very patient, sometimes to a fault with some of those guys. So that's one guy to look at. So Samuel Bolduc, I would say, is a pretty hot commodity there. Bodie Wild. Bodie Wild's an interesting one as well. He was a 2018 second-round pick of the New York Islanders. And he is the same age, maybe a little bit older. He's 22 years old, turning 23 next month. He has not played in the American Hockey League since the 2019-2020 season. And the reason for that was he refuses to get the shot. And if you guys know what I'm talking about, you know where this is going. I don't want to get this video flagged. So because he did not get that shot, he has not played in the Islanders rotation since 2020-2021, and he played 22 games in the AHL. And then this year, he spent the beginning of this year, he played in Allsvenskan, which I'm pretty sure is a league over in Europe. And he put up some decent numbers, 10 points in 40 games, but nothing really that impressive. And he's got 6 points in 24 games in the ECHL. So he's gone from a highly regarded second-round draft pick, potential top 4 defenseman, to all of a sudden playing with the Atlanta Gladiators in the ECHL. So again, it depends on what your value of him is. Is he playing down there because he's not a great enough player, or is he down there because of this whole Lou Lamoriello rule? So those are two guys to look at. Another guy that's kind of interesting, and he's currently playing in the World Junior Championships, is Kale Odelius, I think is his name. He's an interesting character to look at because he's a guy that there was a lot of expectations that he could potentially jump into the lineup in the next 2 or 3 years. Again, he is a recent draft pick either this year or last for the New York Islanders. So he's still got a little bit more development and more seasoning to do than, say, a Samuel Bolduc or a Bodie Wild. So if I had to pick, those were the two guys I would really look at in terms of a defenseman. Of course, draft pick-wise, it's kind of wide open. The Islanders do have their first-round pick this year. They do have their second-round pick. And conditionally, they have their third-round pick. And that has to do with a trade they made, which is the Andrew Ladd trade. And that is the Coyotes receive the Islanders' second-round pick this year if Andrew Ladd does not play in any professional games this season while under his contract and does not retire prior to next season. Or no, this season. So there's a couple conditions there. So that will be either a second or third round pick. So the Islanders, it's depending on what happens with that, they're kind of locked with their second and third round picks now. So that kind of means they have to trade their first either this year in the 2023 draft or in the 24 draft. So the Islanders have to be careful with that. If it is a first round pick, you got to make sure it's probably this year and that you're a playoff team. Without the Islanders are playing right now, there's no guarantee that they make the playoffs. They don't look like a bona fide playoff team. Unless they are guaranteeing the fact, and they really see the fact that Bo Horvat coming in is going to do that for them, it doesn't really make much sense. Now, I could see a scenario here where we see a conditional draft pick for next year. So it's a first round pick in 2024 if Bo Horvat signs an extension with the New York Islanders. And if he ends up walking in free agency this summer and, is potentially a guy that just is a rental for the Islanders, maybe that ends up becoming a second or third round pick instead in the 2024 NHL draft. So there's a little bit of flexibility there. But again, the idea of trading next year's first round pick, I'm not even really sold on the idea of trading this year's first round pick. So the Islanders have to be quite careful if they decide to go down that route. So that was the big report earlier this week. And then we started to hear the stuff about Ratu being connected to the Canucks and that the Canucks had liked what they had seen from him. And then from there, we heard another interesting thing, and that was that Elias Pettersson is the only untouchable in Vancouver. And everybody kind of looked around and said, okay, that's fair. And then they looked and they said, oh, so that doesn't include Quinn Hughes. And I think everybody kind of perked their ears up to that, because it's, wait, so Quinn Hughes is not untouchable? And they kind of, not that they rolled that back necessarily, but with a little bit more context, they said, well, listen, we're not necessarily shopping Quinn Hughes. It's more along the lines of, and this is from Elliot Friedman. He said, the Vancouver Canucks have not deemed Hughes untouchable, but it would take one of the biggest offers ever to move him. So it's one of those things that if you know anything about the Canucks GM, Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin, and some of the things they did in Pittsburgh, it isn't necessarily a group that's afraid to make a move. And a big one at that. And I think that the Vancouver Canucks at this point, according to, shout out to Elliot Friedman and Jeff Marek on the 32 Thoughts podcast, they're a motivated team to make moves because of the state of the organization. And then the cherry on top all over everything that has been involved with the Canucks, their most recent game against the St. Louis Blues, Vancouver Canucks fans have had enough and were chanting, "Sell the team," during their loss to the St. Louis Blues. So that's the cherry on top right before Christmas out in Vancouver. This is a disgruntled, frustrated, some would even say angry organization and fan base in Vancouver. And the question is, when is, the last straw on the camel's back going to go out? Because this is a team that, on paper, should be better than how they've played. And they just have not done that. And considering the Pacific Division, Vegas has kind of fallen back to reality. And Seattle's pretty good, but everybody behind that, it just kind of seems like just everybody's kind of floundering. LA has struggled in between the pipes, and their goaltending hasn't been as good, so they've kind of been hurting in that regard. Anaheim's been one of the worst teams historically, in recent NHL history. So that's kind of a rough situation there. And then, you look at some of those other teams there that are kind of, right in the mix, but in the middle of the pack. Edmonton and Calgary have looked okay. San Jose is what we expected them to be. So, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think down below. What do you guys think of the Vancouver Canucks? Do you guys think they should trade Quinn Hughes? If so, what would the package be? I'd assume it would be similar to a Bo Horvat package, except more involved and more assets. Because the Canucks have to be careful with just willy-nilly giving up a player like Quinn Hughes and Bo Horvat for that matter, because the perception of trading your captain for not that much isn't really a great look for your franchise. And I think that's something that the Canucks are kind of holding dearly here. And they know the backlash from the fan base is already strong. You topple that with a bad trade, or just to make a trade, making a trade just to make a trade and not necessarily what's best for the team long term, could make things even worse. So let me know what you guys think. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again next time.